to another episode of PC Politics, Real, Raw, Relevant, brought to you by Spectacular Magazine. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley. PC Politics deals with issues. We talk to candidates, we talk to politicians, we talk to voters. Today, we are going to be talking to Terence Priester, who is a candidate for Durham County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. Welcome to Spectacular Magazine.
Thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate it.
Durham County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. So what exactly does the person in that position do?
So the Durham County Soil and Water District Supervisor works to establish local soil and water conservation priorities and oversees the implementation of programs based on the needs of the district.
Okay, so you're running for that position.
Yes.
So tell us about Terence Priester and tell us why you feel that you're qualified for that position, to hold that position.
Sure. So I am Terence Priester. Like a tree, my roots run deep and wide. The most influential person in my life is my grandfather. Though he didn't have but a grade school education, he knew how to count his money, and people really depended upon him when it came to financial advice and support. My grandfather was a farmer. He was also a truck driver. He created his own wealth. He owned his own trucks. And I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was raised by a single mother who worked hard to support my sister and myself. I would have enjoyed the privilege of being able to grow up in a community and having access to parks and playgrounds, but unfortunately they were not safe zones. So I didn't have that opportunity. There were no ponds, there were no lakes, there were no gardens, and it didn't take a conservationist to see that our water supply was polluted. Later I moved to Halifax County, North Carolina with my grandfather, and I was able to develop a close relationship with him. Not only did I learn his trade, but I was also able to learn what it means to be a man. That thinking about yourself, or rather being concerned with yourself, is not enough. That you're going to have to make sacrifices for the greater good of others. My grandfather didn't have a college education, but he stressed the importance of me getting my education. So I sit here today on his legacy with my Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice, my Master's in Public Administration, and several other credentials. I live a life of service. I serve my community, I serve my God, I serve my family. When I moved to Durham, North Carolina, I immediately fell in love with the area. I met my wife in Durham. We purchased our first home in Durham. I'm raising our children in Durham. And so I'm very passionate about Durham, and I'm excited about my initiatives, and I'm just ready to get to work.
Okay, you mentioned your initiatives. Let's tell us a little bit about them.
So one of the initiatives that I'm working on would be working with the city to expand the toilet rebate program. Currently that rebate, I believe, is $100 when you purchased one of the efficient toilets. Mm-hmm. I would like to expand that by offering incentives to Durham County home and landowners that actually upgrade their water appliances and plumbing appliances to better conserve and preserve water resources. Mm-hmm. Another initiative that I'm working on, of course, is to expand STEM and the Betsy program. Another initiative that I'm working on would also be to assist the Conservation District with accessing unused territories for conservation efforts. And then another effort that I'm actually working on would be to create and enhance safe community parks and play zones in low-income communities.
Earlier when we talked about environmental justice. A lot of people use that term, environmental justice. Tell us what that means exactly to you.
Environmental justice is just as important as racial justice. You know, when we think about racial justice, we think about racial profiling, we think about redlining, we think about several other different components to that. But when it comes to environmental justice, it's just as important because it has to do with the deprivation of air, water, and soil quality, if you will. Environmental justice also speaks to the many minorities who've been forced into foreclosure or bankruptcy. So environmental justice is definitely important.
And would that come with the putting different, I don't want to call them a junkyard, but you know, the different places where dumps in those areas, putting all of those in the African American or low wealth communities, would that come under environmental justice as well?
It would. It definitely does. It is very important that we are conscious as to what's going on around us. There's been a lot of different studies that has been taking place recently. Studies do show that since 2013, $1,840 of farmers' income has decreased. And I mean, that's just to say the least. When it comes to Superfund sites that are existing in North Carolina, yet alone the United States of America, these issues are definitely of high concern. So we want to be conscious, as residents within our communities as to what's going on.
Let's back up a little bit. You used the word Superfund. Was that F-U-N-D?
Yes.
What is that?
So a Superfund site is a pollution location that requires a long period of conservation cleanup, if you will. There are several Superfund sites in North Carolina, as I've earlier stated, let alone the United States. One of the closest would be in Briar Creek. There's one that is still unresolved that EPA and NCDEQ are currently working to conclude the cleanup efforts for as we speak.
What would you like to see, Durham? I know you mentioned a couple of things, but is there any other things you'd like to see happening here in Durham that we're not currently doing?
Yes, I would like for Durham to actually focus more towards the low-income communities. Areas that do not necessarily have the exact same privileges or access to the same resources as other areas. Mm-hmm. As we know, when it comes to Eno River and Falls Lake, it doesn't necessarily have the exact same issues as Jordan Lake. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take, for us to look very hard at the difference in the demographics. We have to really take time to get involved, but we also need to have our government to focus more on the things that really do matter.
Now, in this position as a conservation supervisor, do you make recommendations to the county commissioners on things that you see out in the field, or that a supervisor would see out in the field?
Sure. I'm sure that we would actually convey information back to the county commissioners, but it's also important as a resident. We have the privilege of being able to sit inside of these city and county meetings, and so that's why it's very important to not only know about what's going on the news, but we have to really be involved and engaged to what's going on in our local committee meetings and so forth.
I think that you expressed that very well. What I'd like to do is get to just talk about you a little bit more. You're a minister, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Of where?
I'm a senior pastor of Embracing Word Church of Raleigh, Durham. We started in the Briar Creek area of Raleigh, North Carolina. We're now in South Square area of Durham, North Carolina, and we are expanding, and I'm very excited about that as well.
And you talk about your love for community. You talked about your education. Tell us where you got your undergrad and master's degree.
Sure. So I've actually started my undergrad education at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. From there, I actually became an employee for the state of North Carolina for the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, which was then the Department of Correction for the Division of Prisons. I was assigned to Nash Correction Institution in Nashville, North Carolina. And during my work, I actually attended the University of Phoenix, and I was able to obtain my Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice, and I continued until I received my Master's of Public Administration.
Okay, wonderful. And you also talked about that you are a member of a fraternity.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
So I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. I am currently the North Carolina Program Implementation Assessment Director for that organization. and I oversee programs and the documentation that is being submitted to the organization.
Excellent. Is this the first time you've run for office?
This is my first time running for a political office.
But you've been involved with politics for a while.
But I have been involved
Talk
with
about
politics
that.
for a while.
Talk about that. Talk about some of the positions and things that you've done.
So I've actually been involved in various committees around Durham community. I have actually worked on the Durham Substance Abuse Committee, 5 Cultural Competency. I've also served with the Guardian ad litem for Durham County District Court. I've been involved with different other community efforts such as National Night Out. The list runs on.
So you love the community.
I love the community. I'm definitely involved and I love the Durham community.
Before we go, what would you like to say to the people that are watching right now?
Well, I just want to say that I'm definitely the man for this role. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a pastor, I'm involved. I truly have a love for people. I believe that everyone should have access to clean resources across Durham County. And I'm just looking forward to being able to serve my Durham community in this capacity.
Thank you so much for coming to PC Politics today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
I've been visiting with Terence Priester, who is a candidate for Durham County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley, and until next time, see ya.
Spectacular Magazine. We on the scene.